Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to thank Hélène and Bernard for inviting us to come and speak to you this evening. I'm not sure how much English you understand, probably more than me. But anyway, Nelly is going to speak in French and we'll sort of share it. My name is John Gale and I'm the chief executive of an organisation called Community, Housing and Therapy, it's the CHT, and we run 5 therapeutic communities for principally for people with a psychosis, and we run an international network, and that's what we're going to speak about. I'm a psychotherapist and one of the people that started this organisation about 20 odd years ago, 25 years ago, and worked in therapeutic communities for a little time before that. Originally I was a Benedictine monk and taught philosophy, so my background was philosophy. Nelly, do you want to introduce yourself?
In English?
French.
Okay, je m'appelle Nelly et je travaille dans CHT, je suis thérapeute dans la communauté et je fais mes études de psychanalyse à Mexique, je suis mexicaine.
Okay, one of the features of this organisation that I run is that we're trying to understand and develop a therapeutic community model by looking at the work of Jacques Lacan. So there's a sort of French connection. I'd like to start, I mentioned the philosophy connection, personal connection, and I'd like to start with a little amusing story about Heidegger. He used to tell this story about himself, about his work. It's quite a nice one because it's somebody who's not known for being particularly amusing, laughing at himself. And he told the story that he went into an inn one day and he saw a strange man sitting in the corner, an inn he used to go into regularly. And he saw a strange man sitting in the corner and he said to the landlord, "Who is that man sitting in the corner?" And the landlord said, "I don't know, none of us know who he is, but he comes in, he's been coming in now for quite a while, he comes in every day and he stays the whole day and he doesn't speak to anyone." So Heidegger thought, I'll go over and speak to him. So he went over to the man and he said, "Hello, I understand you come in every day." And the chap said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, that's quite unusual. Why do you do that?" And the chap said, "Well, the problem is my wife." And Heidegger said, "What is the problem with your wife?" He said, "Oh, my wife, you see, she talks and talks and talks and talks." And Heidegger said, "And what is it she talks about?" And he thought for a long time, and he said, "Of that I do not know." The point being that Heidegger was saying, he talks a lot, he writes a lot, and sometimes he doesn't know what he's talking about. And certainly other people sometimes don't know what he's talking about. The reason I start with that story is because I think what we do in our communities is to talk. Principally, that's what we do. We have conversations in groups, in one-to-one settings. And we don't quite know what it is we're talking about. We never quite know the direction the conversation's going. Of course, Gadamer would say that that's why speech, as opposed to the written word, has a kind of priority. Because it's live, you don't know where it's going. You start a conversation, you never know where it'll end up. From a psychoanalytic point of view, we would say, well, it might go down lots of false tracks and get nowhere and come to dead ends. And then you go back somewhere else and try another route, another conversation, another angle, until somehow perhaps the discourse begins to unfold. The patient begins to engage with the discourse. But the important point I want to underline is that in the work we're doing, as we see it, it's rather important to us that we hang on to the idea that we kind of don't know where we're going. We think that maybe the patient knows something about the truth of their psychosis, but they've forgotten it. They've already forgotten it. Perhaps the whole message of psychoanalysis is that we've already forgotten whatever it was that was important. Anyway, that's just a little sort of ditty, a little story to start with. And now I'll just talk through some kind of basic facts about the organisation we run, and then Nelly will contribute some reflections which will be much more profound than anything I could possibly say. If I sit here, can you see it?
You're in front of the
Oh, I need to move. Should I sit here? Is that better? Okay, so I won't say everything that's on the slide because you've probably most of you got a bit of paper with it on, and anyway, I always think you can read the thing quicker than I can say it. But just as sort of headlines, we're a charity, a registered charity, a company that works with people with mental health difficulties, and we're trying to get people who are very isolated in their psychosis to become socialized in some way, to join a conversation, to begin to enter into a shared discourse. We treat about 150 patients a year, and we employ about 45 staff. Most of them are trainee psychotherapists. Most of them, or many of them, we hope they come in probably as psychology graduates, and we hope that many of them will go on to do a full analytic training. But we also run a training program, a 2-year postgraduate diploma in therapeutic community work. We run this international network, and we have about 1,500 people from about 65 countries. We've got about 30 people in France, I think mostly in Paris. And when we get to 50 in each country, we try and develop a local group. So I hope that it'll go in that direction, and Nelly will be helping with that because of her skills in speaking French. And since the beginning, we've tried to develop this lacanienne angle on therapeutic communities. Partly because Lacan worked with psychosis, and also because of his engagement with philosophy.
Bon, je vais essayer de parler en français, mais si vous avez des problèmes pour me comprendre, vous me dites, s'il vous plaît. Et après, je vais changer en anglais aussi, parce que c'est un peu difficile pour moi de dire tout ce que je veux dire en français. Et bon, on essaie de faire un travail avec les transférences. C'est quand le transfert. Et quand les patients arrivent, de construire un transfert avec les thérapeutes et avec la communauté. D'avoir une communauté qui s'occupe d'écouter le sujet, d'être à l'écoute. De ce qu'elle arrive et avec ça de construire une nouvelle chose pour les patients qui arrivent dans la communauté.
So what we do is we sort of put it under 3 headings, 3 hubs: the clinic, the academic work we do, and the international network. So we're going to say something about each of those 3 things to start with. In the clinical work, you have to keep turning the page, yeah? No, one more. Okay. In the clinical work, as I said, we're treating about 150 patients a year in 5 different communities. Most of them have a psychosis. many have a forensic history, many have a dual diagnosis, and importantly, most of them will be continuing to be in quite an acute state when they come to us. So they'll be continuing to hear voices, cutting themselves, and showing all the usual signs of distress. The staff we are trying to help the staff to engage in this analytic discourse, thinking about the meaning of what's going on in the community, the meaning of the behaviours. We also work with traumatized ex-soldiers. Yes.
Okay. Now I'm going to say this part in English. So we understand and we address the clinic as listening to the other, no? Listening to the patients that come to the community and to listen to the symptoms and work with the symptoms rather than trying to, listening to the symptoms and working with them, no? Waging on language as a possibility to construct, to do something with that overtakes, no? the patients. And always giving a place to listen to what the subject is trying to say, no? With the symptom of cutting himself or herself, or how can I say, overwhelming acts that people in situation of psychosis go through, no? In order to say something. Yeah.
Second hub, the academic work. We run, as I said, a 2-year postgraduate diploma accredited by Middlesex University, and we accept a lot of student social workers, occasionally student psychiatrists, quite a lot of clinical psychologists to come on practicums, and some come for a month, some come for 3 months, 6 months, a year even, so the main part of that experience is the experience of being alongside, living, they don't stay the night, but living in work each day in the community, doing all the daily tasks with the patients. Sorry. I think Nelly's almost as bad as I am about doing these slides. Is that right? No, that's the next one. Do you want to say something about that one?
No.
She's supposed to be looking after me. Okay?
Yeah. So in the academic work, we not only study what is psychosis, how to understand it, but how to position ourselves within the community, no? The importance of how to be there, how to listen to ourselves, being there in the community. And this is something that we find extremely important in the transmission of the therapeutic work within the community.
Our staff also give papers and speak at conferences and things like that. Because of our international links, we do that in the UK but also abroad. And the students that come to us often come from universities abroad. Our senior staff are quite well connected with other organisations. Rex has mentioned the Community of Communities programme at the Royal College of Psychiatrists. We're involved in, have been since it was founded. And the International Society for Psychological and Social Treatments for Psychosis, Consortium of Therapeutic Communities, etc. And we run various workshops and training for people that don't work for us but other professionals and so on, every so often. We also put quite a lot of emphasis on supervision. Both every member of staff has supervision for an hour each week, but also during the course of each day, before and after each group, there are what we call pre- and post-group meetings, which are supervisory meetings, and again the emphasis is on trying to understand what's going on, the transferential elements, and the meaning behind all the things that are being done and said in the particular group or event that's taking place in the community.
Supervision is extremely important to take part in the community, where a senior member of staff supervises another member of staff, to give a space where the therapist can reflect about themselves within the community, because certain things might symptomatically start to occur in the communities. Therefore, to have those spaces in order to reflect, to think what might be happening even between staff, no? Because when working with psychosis, as we know, then things happen between the staff members that they're working with all this, with madness, no? It kind of transfers itself between the staff. So it is very important to find this space of reflection within the community, as well as the pre and the post groups, to kind of understand and analyze what is happening, no, in the community.
You probably know better than me, Lacan was quite interested in the work of James Joyce, and one of the things we were talking about the other day was the way in which Lacan thought that James Joyce stabilized himself, his psychosis, both through his alcoholism and through his writing. And it gave me the idea that perhaps the image for the treatment, if that's the right word, that we offer, is that the psychotic person comes to us like an alcoholic, stabilizing themselves through something that is very destructive. But perhaps they leave, having learned to stabilize themselves through something healthy, like writing, could be writing. So it's that sort of shift we're looking at, rather than imagining that we can shift the psychotic structure. Going on to the third hub, we've started a couple of years ago this international network, which is growing quite quickly. As I said, we've now got 1,500 members in 65 different countries, a lot of people in the Middle East, people in Japan, South America, as well as in Europe. We've had a series of different meetings and a couple of conferences around that. The drivers behind it, the reason we set it up, was because we wanted to inject a bit of psychoanalytic thinking into therapeutic community discourse. And what we found is, the way it's sort of developed, is that a lot of professionals have joined, many analysts actually, analysts mostly in France, Italy and South America, but in the Middle East and some other parts of the world, mostly psychologists. And they're people working not in therapeutic communities, and they probably never will. They're working in mainstream services, but are very interested, extremely interested in therapeutic community thinking and ideas. And so we're sort of working now on the idea of trying to inject some of that humane approach, that thoughtful, analytic approach, into their sort of armory of professional work in these other settings. And in each country where we've got over 50 members, we try to start local groups. And we have a local group in England, Rome, one in London, one in Rome, one in the south of Italy, one in Mexico. We have two likely to be set up in Iran, one in Egypt, one in Pakistan, and one in India, as well as hopefully one in Greece and Hungary. So really it is taking off and going very well, and I very much hope that we will be able to get a group going in France. We're very excited about that because of the tradition of therapeutic communities, whether or not that's the term you use, but Laborde, of course, and Jean Houry, and this whole tradition you have here, which is very interesting and exciting. The objectives for the screen shows the objectives which the advisory panel drew up, very, very broad, and yes, I think that's about all on that. So we wanted to go on and say something about the sort of methodology, the kind of ideas that lie behind the work we're doing, just to finish off. So our aim is to create, in each of our centres, residential settings, which are 5. The smallest has 11 patients and 8 staff, and the biggest has capacity for 20 patients and probably 10 staff, although we haven't got 20 patients yet in it because it's quite a new one. A couple of others have about 15 patients and about 8 staff, 9 staff, something like that. Then we have the students, of course. So in these places, my feeling is that I was speaking about this earlier this afternoon, the communities oscillate between being very therapeutic and being sort of kind of therapeutic and being a bit anti-therapeutic, and it sort of goes in cycles. And when the community is less therapeutic, the staff need to come in and inject some direction and reinforce boundaries and rules and get the people focusing on what the reason for being there is. When the community is going well, the senior patients are doing that themselves, and so the staff can step back, and that's the kind of aim. The staff are aiming to sort of make themselves redundant in a way. Do you want to say something about stabilizing?
So our therapeutic program is designed to stabilize the patients that often come in a very difficult, complex situation. They are discharged from hospital, and they come in a very, even though they have been discharged from hospital, they're in a very complicated situation of a full delirium, like the psychosis is really there, really present. So what we try to encourage is for the clients to begin to take part of the community, to attend the meetings, to come to the groups. We have art group, we have a gardening group, we have baking group, we have a therapy group, and through this act of being there and accompanying them in those tasks, you know, and making sense and opening up a space to think and to listen, you know, about that's they're going through. The idea is to find new possibilities for them to position themselves towards that overtakes them, no? Towards that repeats and insists, no? To do something different. And it's very interesting how through the groups that, you know, it might seem only cooking or only, you know, how with that the patients can give themselves a new sense. Like the example you were talking about earlier about a patient saying that the eggs were poisoned, so forget about the eggs, let's make, what can you cook? You can make a pie, no? So the patient finds a meaning in making and being able to make something for the community and for others, no? And to kind of weave a social bond and go outside that loneliness of the deliriums. No?
The community is quite highly structured around boundaries and rules, and we've set out a sort of brief summary, a couple of paragraphs on this, and perhaps most importantly are there are boundaries, of course, about admission and discharge, and about different roles, staff and client roles, and acceptable behaviour. But there are also very important boundaries about the time, place and purpose of the different activities. These are the kind of boundaries that staff need to be reinforcing and showing that they value. And then gradually, perhaps in the case of our clients who are very, very disturbed, they might at the beginning come in and not attend many groups, and we're very tolerant about that, and they might stay in bed for a few months practically, perhaps getting up at night and watching TV or playing music or something, and we would allow, be quite lenient about allowing them time to sort of gradually gain some sense of belonging. And it might come about gradually, say, in things like starting to attend a meal or smoking a cigarette outside with another client or something like that. So we would see those things as small signs of the person beginning to belong to the community. Later down the road, after they've been with us for quite a while, they will be participating in the groups if things are going well. And when they're at the end of the treatment, they'll be sort of carrying the culture and helping the new people to come in, explaining to them the boundaries and rules and timetable and stuff like that. So we expect to see some sort of change in the position they take in relation to the structures, in relation to the community. And during the middle phase, there might well be a very rebellious phase when they're trying to destroy everything in the community. We wouldn't necessarily see that as something bad.
But although boundaries and rules are very important to structure the community, we do not take a normative position or normative framework. No, we discuss boundaries. Everybody has a say in boundaries and rules, what they think about, and when it's many times the case that for the patients it's difficult to follow these boundaries, no? We address them and we listen to their own difficulty and their own singularity, no? Try explain the meaning of the boundary, not just set the rule. This is the rule, period. Explain why there is that rule and why it has a function in the community and why it's important.
Perhaps a small example would be when I was working in the community. One afternoon a week I used to write reports, and I would sit in the office on in those days an old-fashioned typewriter, typing these reports, and I would have the door of the office open, and there was one young man who came and sat down next to me at the desk, and he said, "Is it all right if I sit here?" He was very psychotic, and I said, "Yes, it's okay as long as you don't speak to me, because I've got to write these reports." And he, you might think that was a very untherapeutic thing to say, but we wouldn't see it quite like that. And anyway, so he sat there for about 20 minutes, and then he went away, and then a little later he came back and sat for another 20 minutes, and then he went away, and he came back and sat for another 10 minutes or something. And he did this every Wednesday. And we had, I would say hello to him, of course, when he came in and all that. But I wasn't getting into a conversation with him. But he somehow, I think, a kind of unknown to me, it seemed, I had a sense that somehow this was something beneficial for him. He was coming, and the closeness was important to him, something to do with the attachment. And it's something I've thought about in relation just to ordinary sessions where you're seeing someone in psychotherapy and they come and they never seem to kind of get to the point, and whatever you do, you can't really get them to do any serious work, but they stay with you for a year or two, and they keep coming, and they keep saying, "This is terribly helpful." And you're thinking, why on earth is it helpful? Because they never seem to getting to starting doing the work. And whatever I say to provoke them, they never seem to quite get there. But somehow I feel that there are these circumstances where somehow just the being there, just the coming and being there, can in itself somehow be shifting something for them, even if it doesn't get articulated. So that's sort of part of the kind of mystery, I think, of what's going on in the community. The singularity of each one. Each one is on his or her own journey, and we're not masters of it. We're not in control of it. We can't be. Groups. So we're running groups during the course of the day, which are quite important. There are two sorts of groups, kind of practical groups, like cooking, cleaning, shopping, gardening, stuff like that, and then psychotherapy groups. And there are common features, common reasons for doing all these groups: sharing information, building a sense of cohesion, togetherness, forging integration rather than splitting, transparency, and things like that. But fundamentally, these groups are directed towards building a discourse, social meaning, a shared meaning. An example might be the community might decide it's going to build a shed in the garden. And building the shed means going to the shop to buy the wood and nails, and coming back and planning it and deciding, having a meeting and deciding where in the garden they're going to put the shed. And then all getting together and having tea while they think about it. And then going and doing some work on the shed. And then talking about how it's gone. And this might go on for ages, and the shed might sort of, be very slow to get built. But the significance of the activity isn't... It might be that a shed is necessary, it probably would be, otherwise they wouldn't be doing it. But the more important thing is the coming together, doing it together, sharing, talking, contributing, building the thing together. So that would be the thing that the staff would be focusing on. Staff regularly clarify to clients to keep them on task. Why are they there? Why are they there? What is it for? An example might be a client that came when I worked in the project. In the interview, she said, I asked her why she wanted to come to the community, and she said because the central heating wasn't working in her flat. So I said I thought that was a good enough reason, so I accepted her. Well, my thinking was she felt there was something wrong in her life, and she was expressing it in terms of the heating. It was apparent that she has a psychosis. So the starting point might be sort of very small. So at that point, it might just be enough to engage with her somehow, to welcome her. But soon after that, she was in a group where everyone was talking to some other client about why were they there, because they'd probably been there for some time and weren't engaging or being destructive. She might be sitting there, she was sitting there being silent, but she's listening to that. She's hearing that, somehow kind of absorbing it and thinking about it. It might take a long time till she gets to the point of saying, the reason I'm here is not actually about the central heating, it's about my life and difficulties. But somehow that clarifying the task is quite a regular and important feature that the staff work on. We said something about the pre and post groups. The community meetings are a very important part of the group. They're kind of in the hinterland between therapy groups and practical groups. And we try to get the senior client who is holding the chairing position to come into the pre-group with the staff to help them take control of the group somehow, to own the group.
Something very important to work with, for example, in the community meeting, is to work so patients can listen to each other, which is something very difficult, especially with psychosis, no? Because they're in their own... it's very difficult for them to actually listen, to be able to listen and see the what the other is asking for. No? So it's something that during group work we can build with them together, kind of introducing little others, no? And which has its effects.
We try to arrange our staffing rota because we are very much governed by regulatory bodies that tell us how many staff we need to have and all that sort of thing. And it's quite a minefield. It's quite difficult to manage all these regulations, but we try to manage our staffing rota in such a way so that new trainees are facilitating groups alongside more experienced therapists and so on. And we work alongside the local pharmacist and psychiatric nurses and psychiatrists to administer medication. But that might be an example of what would be different in our case than in the case of many other services. For example, we have to give out the medication, and there's a lot of form filling in and all that, and it's very much inspected. But we would be, and the staff are trained to do that, and they go on a course and so on to get trained how to give out the medication. And because the work is, the analytical direction of the work is so difficult for the staff, it's difficult for the old staff, but for new staff coming in, it's so difficult, the analytical work, that approach. Because it's so lacking in direction. And so when there's something like the medication training, the new staff love it. They love it. It's something, it makes it clear that I am the one who gives the medication and they're the one that receives it. I've got a form to fill in. It's rather complicated and technical, so that sort of gives me a feeling of self-esteem and like I'm a kind of real professional. So they can get really sort of into this, and they can even, get very excited about, genning up on the transmitters in the brain, etc., etc. But what we're trying to do with the staff is to get them to think about the relationship of the giver of this pill and the receiver, what that means for the relationship, how it might, given the singularity of the subject, how it might be understood, perhaps if somebody's suffering from paranoia, as something evil that's being given, or as a gift, or as a part of the therapist that's being given. And thinking about things from these different varied angles would be the thing we'd be trying to emphasize with our staff, while adhering to the regulatory thing which we have to do to administer it. A very important part of the time in the therapeutic community is the informal time that staff spend with clients, being just normal human beings and not professionals, as it were, as much as possible, alongside them, watching TV, cooking something, doing some gardening, hanging around. It's like going to a party. It's probably one of the most difficult things one can do. It involves so many complex skills. The more unstructured, the more free that time is, the more one is confronted with the madness and how to respond to it, the less one's in that controlling professional role. One doesn't have a job to do, as it were, during free time, except to just be yourself alongside the patient. And because of that, it's not only the most difficult, it's the most valuable, perhaps. So the key idea here is being alongside the clients and finding a position in relation to them, in relation to their madness.
Yeah, so adding to this key idea, I guess it is to build a transference with staff, with the community, where in this encounter something new can be built new creations, something invented, a new way of maybe having the subject position himself or herself towards that, no? That makes him or her suffer, and perhaps a little bit of movement means a radically different possibility of living.
You've stopped speaking in French.
I forgot.
The length of stay is kind of around 18 months, 2 years, 2.5, but it's based on each individual, so we try to gear it to what is best for each individual. We've tended to find that staying for too long, 2 years, is becoming a bit long, and then the person's getting a bit stuck, institutionalized, we would say, in the negative sense. And just the final point is that we've been developing some apartments, flats, we call them step-down flats, is the term that's used, where we provide psychotherapy to people in these flats, and they're people that aren't quite able to move from our therapeutic community just to be completely out in society. So it's something intermediate, and that might last for quite a long time. But it seems to be something, it's also cheaper for the local authorities to pay, so it's rather popular. And it's something we're hoping to develop more, and I know that I know at least one model here with Marcel Sassolas in Lyon, who has a similar program, and there's something similar in Italy too. That's about all we've got to say. I hope the English wasn't too tiring, and there was some little thing to come out of it that might be helpful or interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.